There comes a moment in every life when everything familiar crumbles, when the ground beneath you vanishes and the weight of what you've lost threatens to bury you. You look in the mirror and no longer recognize the reflection staring back. People call it breaking. They say you've fallen apart. But what if the breaking was never destruction? What if it was transformation? You see, what the world calls broken, life calls preparation. You were not shattered. You were stripped of illusions. You were not ruined. You were refined. And beneath the ashes of everything you thought you needed, something stronger was being forged. This is not the story of your end. This is the story of your rebirth. Pain is the passage, not the prison. We are taught to fear pain. From a young age, we're told to avoid it, to numb it, to move past it as quickly as possible. But life, in its quiet wisdom, does not eliminate pain. It uses it. It doesn't come to punish you, but to prepare you. And when you were in your darkest hour, confused, grieving, angry, or utterly lost, you may have believed that you were breaking, that you were collapsing under the weight of it all, that something inside you had shattered beyond repair. But what if that moment wasn't your destruction? What if it was your passage into something far more powerful? Pain feels like imprisonment when you're in the middle of it. The days blur, your thoughts spiral, every emotion weighs twice as heavy. But here's the truth most people avoid saying. Pain is not the end, it's a threshold. It is the narrow hallway between who you once were and who you are becoming. It holds up a mirror to everything you've been taught to bury. And yes, it hurts deeply, but only because it's touching something real, only because it's awakening a part of you that was once silent when you felt like everything was falling apart. You weren't collapsing, you were being rearranged. Everything that couldn't serve your future had to fall away. The false identities, the expectations placed on you by others, the relationships that drained more than they gave, those had to go. And the method life used to do that was discomfort, not because it wanted to harm you, but because it knew you wouldn't let go of what was hurting you until the pain of staying the same outweighed the fear of change. The fire you went through wasn't random, it was refining. Think of a blade being forged. It cannot be shaped without intense heat. And once it's heated, it must be hammered. Not gently, but with force. Not once, but over and over. Only then does it become sharp, unbreakable, and fit for its purpose. That is exactly what pain was doing to you. It wasn't trying to break you. It was trying to bring out your edge, a part of you that could no longer be dull or defeated, the part of you that was made for more. So many people try to escape the very thing that's meant to elevate them. They deny their suffering. They numb it with distraction. They hide behind false strength, pretending they're fine when they're crumbling inside. But there's no healing in pretending. Healing only begins when you walk through the fire, not around it. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. The things that once triggered you start to lose their power. The people who once controlled your emotions begin to fade into irrelevance. And you start to see yourself not as a victim of pain, but as someone who survived it and came out with something no one can take away: wisdom. You were not meant to carry pain forever, but you were meant to learn from it. Let it teach you what matters. Let it show you who's truly in your corner when everything falls away. Let it guide you to the parts of yourself you forgot while you were busy trying to keep everyone else happy. Pain isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. And its message is clear. You are being called to rise. The most powerful people you'll ever meet are not the ones who had an easy journey. They are the ones who walked through hell and came back with clean hands and a clear mind. They are the ones who didn't deny their pain, but transformed it. You see them now strong, calm, grounded. And you might think they were always that way, but they weren't. They earned that peace. They bled for that wisdom. And so did you. The depth of your pain is a reflection of the depth of your purpose. Life doesn't hurt the shallow ones. It challenges the ones with depth. If you felt it deeply, it's because you were meant to live deeply. You weren't just supposed to survive. You were meant to understand what it means to be human, to be broken open by life, and to still rise with compassion, empathy. So, no, you were not broken. You were not weak. You were not defeated. What you went through was your rebirth. That pain carved space inside of you for something greater. It made you softer in the places that needed tenderness and stronger in the places that needed courage. It gave you eyes that see through deception and a heart that knows its worth. You are not who you were before the pain, and that's the point. You have been tempered, refined, made new, and now you walk not with the fear of breaking again, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they already have and lived to tell the story. Identity isn't lost, it's refined. There's a specific kind of pain that comes not from loss, but from losing who you thought you were. When circumstances change so drastically, when relationships fall apart, careers end, trust is broken, or your foundation is shaken, you don't just grieve the situation, you grieve yourself. The version of you that once existed begins to fade, and in the silence that follows, you're left wondering, who am I now? That is the part most people don't talk about, the deep inner confusion that follows a personal storm. The feeling that you no longer fit in your own skin. The memories that once defined you no longer feel true. The goals you once chased no longer feel important. And in that fragile in-between space, it's easy to believe that you've lost yourself. But that's not what's happened. You haven't lost who you are. You've been forced to shed what you never truly were. When everything falls apart, what remains is real. That's the gift hidden beneath the rubble. Life removes what's borrowed, what was built on other people's expectations, on survival patterns, on fear, or on the need for approval. It feels like identity loss, but it's actually identity purification. Who you thought you were was only the surface. Who you're becoming, that's the truth that's been waiting underneath. You see, identity isn't a static thing. It's not a label or a role. It's not the job you have, the family you belong to, or the story others tell about you. Those are layers. They are not the core. The core is something much quieter and much deeper. It's how you show up in the silence. It's who you are when no one is watching, when there's nothing to prove. That version of you cannot be it can only be uncovered when life removed the masks you wore to survive, when it tore down the personas you built to be accepted. It wasn't punishing you. It was inviting you into honesty. It was asking you to meet the version of yourself that doesn't depend on applause, on validation, or on external structure to feel whole. And yes, it's disorienting. Letting go of who you used to be is not easy, especially when that version of you helped you make it through some of your darkest time. But survival identities are not meant to be permanent. They are stepping stones, not destinations. Think of the caterpillar. When it enters the cocoon, it doesn't just grow wings, it dissolves entirely. It turns into something unrecognizable before it becomes what it was meant to be. That middle stage is frightening. It's formless, uncertain, unknown. But without it, there's no transformation. In your life, the moment you stopped recognizing yourself wasn't the beginning of the end, it was the beginning of becoming. You didn't lose your identity. You outgrew the version that was built in fear. You no longer needed to prove your worth through perfection, to find your place through people-pleasing, or to measure your value by how well you performed. That version of you carried you far, but it was never the whole truth. The real you, the refined you, is not something you invent, it's something you remember. And what you'll discover in that remembering is power, not the loud kind, not the kind that shouts or forces or dominates, but the quiet kind, the steady kind, the kind that stands tall without needing to defend itself. Because when you know who you are, truly and deeply, you stop needing the world to confirm it for you. You move differently. You speak more carefully. You stop chasing things that once controlled your peace. You begin to live, not react. There's freedom in shedding the false self. And there's also grief. You might miss parts of your past. You might miss the certainty, the predictability, or even the approval that came with being who others wanted you to be. That's normal. But don't confuse comfort with truth. The real you might feel unfamiliar at first, but give it time. Growth always starts in discomfort, and clarity always follows surrender. As you reclaim yourself, piece by piece, you'll notice the world responding differently. The people who only knew the old version of you might not understand. That's okay. Some will fall away. Others will stay and grow with you. But either way, you're no longer living to be understood. You're living to be whole. And in doing that, you attract what was meant for the version of you that had the courage to evolve. So no, your identity wasn't lost in the storm. It was revealed through it. You didn't come out of that season broken. You came out honest. You came out with a clearer sense of your values, your boundaries, and your purpose. That clarity is priceless. It is your compass. It will guide you through every future challenge with greater strength and deeper wisdom. This new version of you, this refined self, was always inside you. The struggle simply stripped away what no longer belonged. You are not who you used to be, and that is something to celebrate, not mourn. Because now you are living from the inside out, not the outside in. And that is where true freedom begins. The collapse was a catalyst. At some point in your life, everything you leaned on seemed to crumble. The plans you made unraveled. The people you trusted disappeared or changed. The future you were working toward no longer made sense. And in that silence, after the chaos, there was a terrifying emptiness. You asked yourself, why did this happen? How did it all fall apart? But the question that mattered more was, what is this collapse trying to reveal? It's a difficult truth to accept, but one that transforms lives. Collapse is not always a failure. Sometimes it's the only way forward. We don't usually change when things are comfortable. We rarely question our beliefs, patterns, or relationships when everything feels stable. But when that illusion of control is stripped away, we're forced to confront what we've been ignoring. The collapse didn't ruin you, it awakened you. Life often removes the things that no longer serve us, but it rarely does so gently. It shakes the foundation because it knows we've been building on something that cannot carry the weight of our future. And though it may look like destruction, it's actually realignment. The structures that fell were never meant to stand forever. They were temporary supports for a specific season, and once that season ended, they had to go so something truer could rise in their place. You see, collapse reveals what was hidden. It exposes the cracks we covered with excuses. It highlights the relationships that were conditional. It brings to the surface every truth we were too afraid to face. And while that revelation is painful, it's also the beginning of wisdom. Because once you've seen what was fragile, false, or forced, you can begin to rebuild with honesty. Think back to the moments in your life when you felt the most broken. What followed those seasons? A new understanding, a deeper capacity for empathy, a stronger set of boundaries. The collapse didn't end you, it matured you. It pushed you into growth you may have never chosen on your own. That's what catalysts do. They don't wait for permission. They come to disrupt the cycle so that something greater can emerge. It's important to understand that you didn't fail just because things ended. Not every ending is a mistake. Sometimes it's the most compassionate thing life can offer you. The job that closed its doors, the relationship that couldn't survive the pressure, the version of you that couldn't continue carrying pain silently. All of it needed to fall, not to break you, but to build something better in its place. And that something better doesn't always look like success right away. It often begins in quiet clarity, in the moment you realize you can finally breathe, in the peace that follows the storm, in the rediscovery of your own voice, no longer drowned out by the noise of obligation. That is what the collapse gave you. Space to begin again, not as a reaction to what hurt you, but as a conscious decision about what matters to you now. Most people fear collapse because they think it means losing control. But what if losing control is exactly what was needed? What if your grip on that relationship, that identity, that path was what kept you from growing? The harder we cling to what's no longer aligned with us, the more we suffer. Surrender isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment you trust that life is leading you somewhere your logic cannot yet understand. The collapse was not a punishment, it was an invitation to stop surviving and start living, to stop pretending and start being, to stop shrinking and start expanding. Yes, it came through difficulty, through heartache, through confusion, but it came to wake you up. And now that you are awake, you cannot go back. You can't unknow what you've learned. You can't unsee the truth. And that's a good thing, because clarity is power. Rebuilding after collapse isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone stronger, wiser, more grounded. You're not rebuilding the same life, you're building a better one that aligns with your values, your truth, your deeper calling. You get to decide what stays this time. You get to choose your boundaries, your purpose, your pace. That is the gift the collapse left behind. The authority to design a life that reflects who you've become. So don't resent what had to end. Don't curse the falling apart. Honor it. Because without it, you may have continued down a path that kept you unseen, unheard, and unfulfilled. The breaking was brutal, but it brought breakthrough. It removed the noise so you could hear your own soul again. It cleared the space so something beautiful and lasting could be built. You are not standing in ruins. You are standing on cleared ground. And from this place, you rise not with fear, but with faith. Not in what you lost, but in what you're about to create. This is not the aftermath. This is the beginning. You were never meant to stay small. There is a moment in every journey where you begin to realize that the pain you went through wasn't just about survival. It was about expansion. And in that realization, something profound becomes clear. You were never meant to stay small. You weren't created to shrink in order to be accepted. You weren't meant to silence your voice to keep the peace. You weren't born to live a life that fits comfortably within other people's expectations. You were designed for growth, for depth, for impact. But life has a way of teaching us to dim ourselves. Early on, we learn to play it safe. We internalize the idea that being too honest, too passionate, too bold might make others uncomfortable. So we tone ourselves down. We conform. We choose familiarity over freedom, and for a while, it works. We blend in. We become what we think we should be, but deep inside, there's a restlessness, a quiet ache that tells us we were made for something more than just fitting in. When you went through your personal collapse, when the identity you once wore began to fall apart, that wasn't the end of your story. It was the start of your reawakening. That was life calling you to rise, not just to heal, but to grow beyond who you used to be. It was the beginning of your emergence, the first crack in the shell you had outgrown. And that process, while painful, was necessary. Because growth never happens in stillness. It happens in tension, in friction, in movement. Think of how a seed grows. First, it is buried, hidden in darkness, isolated in soil. But in that hidden place, transformation begins. The seed breaks, not because it is weak, but because it is becoming. What once was contained now starts to reach for light. It pushes upward. It dares to break the surface. And when it does, it doesn't just grow for itself. It becomes something that brings beauty to the world around it. That is you. You are not buried, you are planted. And your time to rise has come. So much of your past may have been spent trying to be manageable, to not take up too much space, to keep your dreams small enough that they wouldn't be criticized, to keep your needs quiet enough that they wouldn't be rejected. But silence is not peace. Shrinking is not safety. There is a cost to staying small, and it is your soul. When you deny your truth, when you hide your light, you slowly lose connection to the very things that make you whole, and that is no way to live. The moment you decided to rise, truly rise, you made a sacred agreement with yourself. An agreement to no longer abandon your own potential for the sake of comfort, to no longer shrink your truth to avoid conflict, to no longer edit your story to please those who were never meant to understand you. That moment was your turning point. Because stepping into your fullness is not about arrogance. It's about alignment. It's about finally saying yes to the version of you that's been waiting in silence, hoping you'd remember who you really are. And when you begin to expand, you will feel resistance, not because you're wrong, but because growth threatens the systems that relied on your smallness. Some people may not understand your evolution. They might question your choices. They might pull away. That's okay. Growth will always require letting go. Not everyone can walk with you into the next version of your life. But those who are meant to remain will celebrate your expansion, not resent it. You must also let go of the belief that you need permission to grow. You don't. You don't need validation to take up space. You don't need consensus to follow your calling. You are allowed to evolve, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You are allowed to outgrow environments, friendships, beliefs, and roles. You are allowed to want more, not out of greed, but out of purpose. Because your life is not a performance, it is a message, and the more you embrace your full self, the more powerful that message becomes. Every time you step into your truth, you break a generational pattern. Every time you speak your heart, you create space for someone else to do the same. Your growth is not selfish, it is service. It is healing in motion. It is courage becoming contagious. And it begins the moment you choose to stop hiding and start honoring who you are becoming. You were never meant to stay small. You were meant to evolve, to expand, to rise. You were meant to explore the full spectrum of who you are, not just the parts that make others comfortable. And yes, that path will be uncertain at times. It will ask more from you than you thought you had, but it will also give back tenfold. It will give you peace, clarity, purpose, and strength that cannot be shaken. This is your season of emergence, of becoming unapologetically whole. The world doesn't need a watered-down version of you. It needs the real you, the healed you, the expanding you. So step forward, speak louder, love deeper, create freely. You're not here to merely exist. You're here to transform, and in doing so, to inspire others to do the same. Rebirth is responsibility. Rebirth is often imagined as a moment of light, an awakening, a surge of strength, a realization that changes everything. And while there is truth in that image, the part that's often forgotten is what comes after the awakening. Because being reborn doesn't just give you freedom, it hands you responsibility. Not the kind that weighs you down, but the kind that calls you up. The kind that says, now that you've risen, what will you do with this new life? You see, healing doesn't end at feeling better. That's only the beginning. True healing demands action. It calls you to live differently, to walk with intention, to use your growth as a foundation for something greater. The pain you survived shaped you, yes. But the person you are becoming, that's your creation. That's your responsibility. And it begins with owning your story. Not just the beauty, but the broken chapters too. It's tempting to believe that once you've healed, life will be easy. But growth is not the end of difficulty. It's the start of deeper purpose. Rebirth hands you new eyes to see, new clarity to act, and a new sense of truth. That's powerful, but it also means you can no longer pretend not to see. You can't go back to ignoring what you once accepted. You can't keep living small, disconnected, or misaligned, not without feeling the cost in your soul. Responsibility in this sense is not a burden. It's a sacred trust. It's the understanding that your transformation is meant to have an impact not just on you, but on the world around you. The strength you built wasn't for show, it's meant to serve. The wisdom you gained wasn't just for healing wounds, it's meant to guide others out of theirs. Rebirth invites you to take your experiences and turn them into something meaningful. And this doesn't require perfection. Responsibility isn't about having it all figured out. It's about showing up with honesty. It's about choosing integrity when shortcuts tempt you. It's about leading with compassion even when no one is watching. It's about becoming someone whose life speaks clearly, consistently, and with courage. Because people don't follow words, they follow presence. They follow character. And the person you are now, after all you've been through, has more influence than you realize. There's also a responsibility to protect your growth. Just because you've outgrown the past doesn't mean it won't try to pull you back. Old patterns don't disappear overnight, they test your strength. And when they do, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a chance to choose differently. It's a moment to say, I've been there, I've done that, and I don't live there anymore. Your rebirth gives you the authority to draw new boundaries, not out of fear, but out of respect for your healing. The responsibility also looks like making peace with your past, not carrying it as shame, but holding it as sacred. What you went through mattered, but it doesn't define you, it refines you. Every painful experience became part of your training. Every loss shaped your clarity. Every silence taught you to listen deeper. Now you get to decide what meaning those moments carry. You get to narrate your own story. That's the power of being reborn. You no longer wait for life to hand you a script. You write your own. And when the world questions your change, as it often will, your responsibility is not to justify your evolution. It's to live it. Quietly, boldly, authentically. Let your presence be the evidence. Let your life speak for itself. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're here to walk in it. Every step forward you take is an act of responsibility to the person you are becoming and to the life you are meant to live. Don't mistake this responsibility for pressure. It's not about doing more, achieving more, or proving anything. It's about alignment. It's about moving through life in a way that reflects who you truly are. The more you honor that, the lighter you feel. Because truth doesn't weigh you down, it frees you. And responsibility, when rooted in truth, becomes a form of self-respect. There's also a responsibility to those who are still where you used to be. You don't have to fix their journey, but you can walk in such a way that they see hope in yours. You can speak with such honesty that others feel safe to be real. You can live with such clarity that others are inspired to ask, what changed in you? And when they do, you won't need to preach. Your life will be the answer. You were not reborn just to feel better. You were reborn to live better, to lead by example, to create with purpose, to love with depth, to speak with courage, to stand with grace. That is the responsibility of rebirth. Not to escape the world, but to return to it stronger, softer, and more sure of who you are. So now, the question is yours to answer. What will you do with the life you've fought so hard to reclaim? What kind of legacy will your healing write? Because this moment is not the end. It's the beginning of everything real. The path ahead is yours to walk, and you are ready.